Hello, friends. Welcome back to Market Shares. I'm your host, Tony Blodgett, and as you can see, we're still down here in Studio B as we continue to put the final touches on our new main studio after our move. But you know what? I'm starting to like this studio more and more. Andy, what do you think? This is pretty nice.
Awesome.
This is pretty awesome.
Great setup.
I have with me a good friend of mine. His name is Andy McDonough, and Andy and I have known each other for many years. He's, up here in the Seattle area, always worked in mortgage leadership for the whole time that I've known him, probably since, the late 90s or so. He's been in leadership and just a great reputation, a great person to know. But what I want to talk about today is Andy's current role as the president of the Washington Mortgage Bankers Association, a position that I had the opportunity to hold back in 2017. And we've talked about this a little bit on the podcast, just how important I think it is for mortgage professionals to be involved in their industry. And, Andy, I think, didn't you take a step away from the WNBA for a couple of years? Came back, and man, he's doing a lot of work right now to help organize, revitalize, and make sure that we have a sustainable, local MBA chapter. And so I really commend the work that Andy's putting in, but I don't know that everybody who's in the industry understands the value sometimes of some of these trade groups and why, you might want to participate. We had Peter Ryu on here a few weeks ago talking about AREAA. He's the new president there. And I thought it made sense, since this is a organization that I've been a part of personally and am still a board member of, to talk a little bit about the benefits of that. And then, of course, being two, leaders in the mortgage space, we're going to talk some mortgage stuff today too. But I thought I'd start with the WNBA. And Andy, I want to thank you for taking the time to come in today and have this conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Great to be here.
Yeah, no, it's been great. So how long have you been, let's just get a little background. So
Sure.
like in mortgage, how long you been doing mortgage?
Yeah.
How long you've been in leadership, and then how long you've been part of the WNBA?
All right. Well, I started in the mortgage industry in 1997 back in the Twin Cities. And I was in it for a year and a half. And I submitted my application for a branch manager job. We were opening up a new branch at Northgate. So in 1998, fall of 1998, I moved here. I didn't know anybody.
To be a branch manager.
1
year in the mortgage business.
Year and 3 months.
You always shoot for the top, don't you?
Year and 3 months. And then I did that role for a while, and it was awesome. Learned a lot, had good successes, and became an area manager and moved to the Bay Area for a year. And then I wanted to get back to Seattle. And so I moved to Seattle in 2001, started at Washington Mutual. My wife at the time, Danny, was a mortgage broker at Seattle Mortgage. So we did the banker-broker thing. Okay. And then before Washington Mutual went under, I kind of saw some red flags, and I teamed up with Rosemary David at First Horizon Home Loans. And, if you look at our resumes or our LinkedIn profiles these days, it seems like we move around, but we actually don't. I've been with the same group for over 15 years mostly. And we went from First Horizon to MetLife. Then we went to Home Street, and we were there for a while, and then we went to Homebridge, and then we went to CMG Home Loans. But that's all mergers and acquisitions.
Right.
And I'm happy to say, our company right now is really good. And as you know, through these mergers and acquisitions, you take the best of these different companies and you put them together, and, you come up with a new company that's doing things the right way.
Yeah, well, I got to say, as far as a leadership team goes, I mean, Rosemary, everyone associated with that group, to go through the amount of change. It's and amazing. I mean, some of these companies have gone out of business. Sometimes it was a proactive merger, all different circumstances, and your team has stayed together the whole time. I mean, what a testament to leadership there. There's no doubt. So always admired what you guys have done there. Well, that's exciting. So today you're running a branch in the Seattle metro area. Sounds like also focusing a little bit on origination, maybe getting back to the roots a little bit, and helping people get into homes.
Yeah, I actually took 6 months off during one of those transitions. Honestly, I got burnt out, And I learned a lot through that process, but I took 6 months. I reconnected with the family. I did some traveling around the country with my dog and really kind of reprioritized things for me. And part of that was getting in touch with why we do what we do. And honestly, it's helping people. And I can't imagine a more satisfying opportunity to help somebody realize that dream of homeownership and actually make it a good situation, a good experience for them. Answer all their questions, you educate them, there's no stress. And before you know it, they're in their house and they're like, wow, that wasn't that bad. And they walk away and they feel really happy about it and they're happy to refer their friends and family to you. And to me, there's nothing more gratifying than that. So to be a part of that, you know, in leadership or actually working with the customer or working with the agent, I think that is where the gold is.
Yeah. I've got to tell you, and I've mentioned this on the podcast, you know, there's times when you've been in leadership as long as we have, I mean, you got to miss working with clients, you know, and the problem solving and the fact finding and, you know, everybody's situation is so unique and different. And then you have this family who's like super grateful for what you do. I mean, when all you are is in leadership and you're managing other mortgage professionals, you know, I'm sure people appreciate what you do, but it's not the same. It's definitely a different type of gratitude for sure.
It's not the same. And there are times at my different roles or responsibilities or positions where, you know, I felt like I was able to have a greater impact, a greater ripple effect, because if I could help that loan officer or that branch or that team or that processor, underwriter solve a problem, overcome, you know, obstacles to help that client get the home, then I was having a broader reach and I was helping their families as well as the clients and everybody involved. But again, it's like when you're removed, it's not the same as like right now. I just had a closing in Minneapolis, ironically, and these people, they never bought a home before, and they had a lot of questions, and it was awesome. And like, we're really close. Same thing, a couple months ago, a first time buyer, she, you know, had ADHD and she was very, very nervous and had a lot of questions. And I'm like, okay, let's just sit down and we'll take as much time as we need. It was like a 2.5 hour Zoom call with her and her new agent who was also learning. But I sat there and I was just like sitting back, enjoying the ride because I knew things that they didn't. So I was bringing them value. I was bringing them information and I was bringing them comfort and security and safety. That was pretty cool.
Well, I think so many of us forget about that aspect of our industry, and that's got to give you the good feelers, you know, doing some of that work again, and probably even reignite your passion overall for the industry.
It does. And, you know, speaking of, you know, the WMBA has allowed me to kind of play out and fulfill that leadership desire that I have. It's like naturally in me that I want to be in leadership because I want to have a positive impact in other people's lives. But to have that frontline experience is very different. And it's very rewarding.
Well, when you mentioned you took some time off, it triggered a memory that you did some movies, right?
I did, yes.
So
I have.
I
still am.
You still are? Let's talk about that for a minute, because I think this is fascinating.
Yeah.
And some of them, people may have heard of the movies that you've been in. Now, were you a director? Were you financing them? Were you kind of tell us your involvement with the movie industry? Well, and how did it happen?
Yep. So if you don't mind, I'm going to take one step back.
Yeah, please.
When I moved here in 2000, I drove across the country with a high school friend with all my worldly possessions. And when we saw Mount Rainier, we're like, let's make a pact. Within 2 years, let's climb Mount Rainier.
Okay.
And so my brother, he's a firefighter back in Green Bay. We've climbed for a decade, 2000 to 2010. We climbed all the mountains in the Northwest and other places in Mexico, even attempted Denali up in Alaska. But for me, that was a huge outlet to recharge, to get perspective, to fill up the buckets in my life, whether it be work, my family, everything, my relationships. And it motivated me and inspired me because I was removed from the busy work that we were in, which was a lot. Like you and I both know, we worked hours and hours and hours for many, many years. But climbing allowed me to recharge and rejuvenate. So once we kind of hung up our ice axes and our crampons, because everyone had younger families and that time away was very precious. Do you want to go spend a week on the beach with your wife and kids? Or do you want to spend a week on the mountain, you know, in a smelly tent with your buddy?
Right.
Which priorities shift. So in 2010, we kind of said, okay, we're going to shelf that. And then I was like, for 2 years, starting to feel that vacuum that gap, that missing piece. And I started to get a little anxious. And then I just I took some writing workshops, and then I took some filmmaking workshops. I'm like, I need to get back into creative. And if I'm not going to be climbing, I want to be creative and fill up those other buckets. So I started, just putting it out there, and I started talking to people. Yeah, I'm interested in, starting to get into filmmaking and writing more. And so one thing led to another. Our first documentary that I helped produce was K2 Siren of the Himalayas. And it happened because I was just throwing it out there to people. And one of my friends is like, hey, I've got a friend, and they just made this movie Sonic Skate, and they got another one that they're looking at, and it's about these guys that tried to climb K2. I'm like, okay, that's a nice seamless transition from climbing to documentary filmmaking. Let's make a climbing documentary. So we worked really hard on that for 6 months, all in, still doing the day job, still doing the family and everything. But again, this is my creative outlet. And, we got to tour at film festivals throughout the world. We won awards, and it was super rewarding. And then it was like, okay, that filled me up in ways that I couldn't get in other areas of my life. So then we went on, and I'm still making documentary films as a producer. Sometimes it's an executive producer, but a lot of times I really enjoy the hands-on nature of being the producer in the day-to-day. We did Dirtbag, The Legend of Fred Beckey.
I saw that one.
That was in 2017. Super proud of that one. We were able to complete it before Fred's passing at 90. He was 93. And
is that still available on major streaming outlets or
Amazon? You can watch it for free on Amazon Prime. And again, we're super proud of that because we were able to tap into. Fred was a mentor to many people. He was a very divisive kind of individual because he lived life with a singular purpose. He has more first ascents of North American peaks than anyone. He wrote all these guidebooks. In fact, when I was climbing, I remember buying one of Fred's guidebooks for one of the climbs we were doing, which is pretty cool, and we spent the last few years of our life with him. But we partnered with Patagonia. They were actually a sponsor on it because Fred was Yvon Chouinard's, mentor. And Yvon always kind of looked over Fred because Fred thought that was a sellout. All these guys that made all these clothing companies and outdoor gear companies, he only wanted to go climbing. And if you had a job or a wife or a family and you couldn't go climbing with them, then he'd say, all right, screw you. I'm going to go to the next guy and we'll find a new partner. Anyway, so it's that human character study that we really enjoyed in some of these adventure documentaries that we've been producing. Sam Now was just nominated as a finalist for a Peabody. That's on PBS.
What's that one? What was that one?
Sam Now.
Sam Now?
Yeah, it's a local Seattle family dealing with generational trauma and kind of how to break that cycle. And it was filmed over 30 years, very artistic film and very real and raw and vulnerable. So that's another one to check out.
All right, I will.
But yeah, we're working on one right now that has to do with the wool industry and kind of the impact of, regenerative ranching practices and how these forever chemicals are now starting to be banned in states, like even Gore-Tex and stuff. So there's this tap back into the wool industry, and we got to visit with all these ranchers and stuff over this last year, and it was very, very interesting.
Wow. Well, yeah, I did watch the Dirt. It was on Netflix. Was it on Netflix
for
a while?
A lot of them are still available on other streaming platforms like Netflix and Apple TV and all that stuff.
Yeah, Dirtbag was really good. And you mentioned Mount Rainier, and if you're not from the Pacific Northwest, Mount Rainier is just this ominous, mountain that shoots out above the clouds. So I could see where someone, coming to this area would be like, okay, I got to go to the top of that thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really, really impressive mountain. I'm sure many people have heard of it, but unless you've been in the Northwest or in Seattle and you see it, you're like, you can see it from everywhere.
It's 100 miles from Seattle, but when it's a clear day, it's like popping. It's so big.
It's crazy. Well, that's really cool. Well, that's, so many people don't have these, I wanted to bring up the filmmaking thing because it's so random, but at the same time, so many people could benefit from finding a creative outlet or finding, a hobby or something. And we get so mired in our jobs and our work.
Agreed.
And so good for you for taking the time. And for your family and your wife for letting you explore that kind of stuff, right? I mean, you have a good support network to be able to do some of that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, let's talk a little bit about the WNBA for a minute. And so the reason I wanted to bring this up is because our industry is, to me, when I think of the WNBA, I think about two different things. I think of advocacy, for the mortgage industry when it comes to legal and legislative things. And the reason why our group in particular is so influential in that in the state of Washington is because we have a lobbyist that works with the WMBA, and I've learned so much over the last 10 years of really understanding how it is that lawmakers make some of their decisions. And you might think, I think a lot of people think that, hey, they make these decisions in a vacuum. What were they thinking when they came out with this? But the reality is that, and for some of them, they do have to make decisions in a vacuum. These bills come down and there's only, so much time to review them. We all hear about this stuff that happens either at a local or a national level where a 1,500-page bill comes across someone's desk and they're all expected to sign it within 24 hours. But the reality is there's key people who spend a lot more time drafting, those laws, those bills, and so on and so forth. And they do seek out guidance and input from the industries that are impacted. And that's what brings us back to the WNBA. We've had the great fortune as an organization to have a really good relationship with the Washington State, DFI, the Department of Financial Institutions. They often will reach out to us when they're looking at, proposing new rules, new laws, new enforcement, whatever the case may be. And we actually, as a board, have an opportunity to share our feedback or then reach out to our members of the WNBA, to their legal departments, their compliance departments, get feedback and share that directly with the DFI. But also, Jessica, our lobbyist, they do the same thing with her. They will reach out and say, who should we be talking to that could give us some insight as to these laws that we may be proposing, how they're going to impact the consumer in ways that we might not be thinking about. And I bring this up mostly because I just don't think our industry understands. And I know that they don't, because I think if they did, they would pay much more attention and be more involved in organizations like this, because it's not just about going to a happy hour or a dinner or seeing a guest speaker or, whatever kind of event we put on, because we certainly have a networking aspect to the organization, as most do. But there's real work and change that can be implemented when you're part of an organization like this. So I don't know. I don't know if you have any thoughts you want to expand on that. And then I want to talk, after you do that, a little bit about what I've learned. Because, I hear lobbyist and I just hear that sounds horrible. Lobbyists are evil people. And I've spent some time talking to Jessica, and I want to at least give my perspective on what I've learned from her. But maybe you have some thoughts on this.
Well, first of all, our lobbyist, Jessica Fortescue, is amazing. She's probably the most valuable element to the Washington Mortgage Bankers Association, and that's why we can say we are the voice of the mortgage industry here in the Washington state. Right. We advocate for home ownership. We connect, we have a community, we network, but ultimately we're all working hard to make the dream of homeownership more accessible. Right. And that's becoming more and more of a challenge due to affordability and the lack of housing units and all those things. But that's why we get up and go to work every day. That's why the WMBA exists. That's why Jessica is probably sent 4 or 5 emails on topics between the last 2 days alone that we need to be talking about and considering. As far as her as a lobbyist, Jessica is well respected, not just in Washington state on both sides of the aisle, because she prioritizes both sides of the aisle. She doesn't try to play one side or the other. She's very smart, very pragmatic, and she represents the interests that we, go back and forth on. And then she figures out the right way to say it and the right way to bring it up as far as a perspective on how it will ultimately impact the consumer. Because that's what every lawmaker wants to hear. How is this going to impact the person that's either going to vote for me or not vote for me? Right. And I've learned that at the national level too. So at the National Mortgage Bankers Association, Jessica's just as respected. She's considered one of the best lobbyists in the country. And so we work closely with them. And one of the topics that we were just talking about over the holidays is rent control. So, we've got to play that very carefully. There are definitely interests that support it and definitely interests that object to it. And we're trying to figure out the best way to navigate that, I guess, tumultuous topic. And, I think ultimately Jessica doesn't endorse one way or the other. She just tries to bring up the sides of the story that matter in how it will impact the consumer.
Right.
And I think we're on board with that too. We're not trying to be, hitching our wagon to any type of political affiliation or any candidate even. We're trying to remain neutral because ultimately we're all advocating for home ownership. And so that's an interesting line to balance as we navigate some of these topics, especially, with down payment assistance programs. Do you offer one, category of people a product where you don't offer another? Maybe it's worth it. Maybe it's justified. But those are the things that we get to vet. And you and I were even on a topic where we served on a subcommittee and we testified when it came to licensing for branches during COVID. I mean, the way the state law was written, you couldn't take an application unless it was in your licensed branch. And everybody knows, like throughout the country, people work from home. Even before COVID, or they were working from Starbucks, which is a different story, but you're working from home, with the security involved and the digital data, how everything is, run and screened. And again, it's very, very secure. It's more secure to do something from your home sometimes than it is to go pick up documents from somebody and bring them home or bring them to the office.
Right.
So, there are important topics like trigger leads that we're working on right now. I think there was a lot of, what's the right way to say it? A lot of lawmakers really didn't know anything about it because immediately when you think about trigger leads, which is essentially once somebody pulls a credit report, those credit bureaus sell that information to other lenders. They pay money for it, and then those lenders start calling the clients. And I brought up the example when we were in D.C. last year to a lawmaker, and it really surprised him. I had a new loan officer start. He took a new application, his very first one, and within an hour of him submitting that application, that client had 53 phone calls. And that is not a good thing. That is not a good experience for a client. But the lawmaker is saying, well, we have to make sure that it's a competitive environment so that the client can get the best deal or the best rate and fee program. Yeah, that's true. But this isn't a good experience for anybody.
Right.
So we're educating people on, the negative side of trigger leads right now. And that's coming up at a national level this year. And then, whatever. There are a few other topics.
I was asked by Jessica to speak to, I think there was some members of DFI there, and there was some members from the local lawmakers or representatives of local lawmakers, and it was about doing documents in other languages because there's a big push to be able to do some of our loan documents in other languages, not just Spanish, but Spanish and Mandarin and, a number of other languages. And we're able to explain to them some of the challenges that we have, and not only the challenges that we have, the contradictions that currently exist in how it is that you can even advertise or market to people in certain languages because we don't have the ability to do applications in those languages. And anyway, it was a great opportunity to share just some knowledge with them. Yeah. And honestly, it was like item after item, they had no idea. They're like, wow, like no wonder why as an industry, you haven't moved to do this. Like you really can't, and when they understood that, now there's an opportunity for change to actually happen. And, had Jessica not had the relationship with those lawmakers to where they're reaching out to her and saying, who could you put us in front of to help better understand this? And that's, to me, the power of what Jessica does. And, when I think of a lobbyist, I think of you think of the healthcare industry, or you hear about all these, and it's like they have an agenda and they're pushing an agenda for an industry.
Grease the wheels
and all this stuff. And you just think, man, what a negative connotation it has. And then as I've learned what Jessica does, it's quite frankly, it's been a real education for me to understand that, to your point, she's building relationships on both sides of the aisle. She is, a conduit for information that otherwise never would have got, to these lawmakers who, frankly, a lot of these people are elected into their position. It's many times a part-time role. They don't that's not how they make their primary source of income, but yet they're making the laws in our states, and they are from completely different industries and have no idea, what it is that we do, and we need to have that relationship. And one of the things I wanted to add, Andy, which, was the Political Action Committee, the PAC. Yep. And you hear a lot about PACs and super PACs and all this stuff. You hear a lot about it during elections, and I'm like, what are these PACs and how does this work? And essentially, a PAC is just, people donate to these political action committees, and then they use those funds to do whatever. Like in a campaign, they're giving funds to, the people that are campaigning, so on and so forth, to help them run ads, do whatever they support. But we have a PAC here in Washington, and until I was part of the WNBA and really part of the executive board, where Jessica would give us a list of, these are the people I think that we should contribute to from the PAC. And, and some of them were like $100 or $200. I'm like, help me understand, like, what's the benefit of $200? And it's like, well, it's not the $200. The $200 helps and it adds up, but it's the opportunity to sit down for 25, 30 minutes, get to know this person better. They get to know me, and I become a resource. And you start realizing that it's not so much about greasing the skids for any one particular agenda. It's about developing relationships, and the PAC gives her the funds necessary to open those doors and create those relationships. And the reason I bring this up is because I'm a big contributor to the local PAC. So many others are. I'm sure you are as well. All of us on the board that see it go, oh my gosh, this is so valuable and so important. But I don't understand why every loan officer, every processor, every underwriter, everybody who makes a living from this industry, if they really understood the value of what $100 could do, if they contributed to the PAC, and how that would be utilized to help create relationships and communication that ultimately can promote or even stop things from happening that would negatively impact not just our industry but our customers, who rely on us, to help them.
Okay, so I'll try and unpack this. For me, the easiest way to start is talk about awareness and knowledge, right? For the first 15 years of my career, I had no awareness and no knowledge of the WMBA, let alone the national mortgage bankers. So nobody talked about it. None of my leadership did. We were all like in our zone. We were worried about our production, our branches, our regions, whatever it might be, our company's results. That's kind of like inbred in our business. Like that's how we, keep firing every day. We're very motivated. This is a very dynamic industry. The problem is that when there's no awareness and no knowledge, then, you get stuck in your lane. So when I finally started to get exposed to the WMBA, I started to really kind of study it and take it all in and then figure out, oh my gosh, to your point, I need to do something. Like I can't just sit by, because this impacts our livelihood, not only as an industry, but as a consumer. Who knows what decisions are being made by those people that may or may not know anything about a mortgage,
right?
Let alone spell it. But once you start to get involved, you start to realize there's a lot of people putting in a lot of time and energy to support homeownership and those efforts and creating that awareness to the lawmakers that are making the decisions and are making the laws. I would say the PAC, the Political Action Committee, like you said, $100, $200 gets Jessica a seat at the table. And that helps to cultivate the relationship so that when something comes up, that lawmaker can reach out to Jessica and say, hey, I'm not really quite sure on this. How does this impact you guys? Jessica comes back to us. And then, like you said, we all get together, we provide feedback. We have legal counsel at these different companies that provide feedback from a legal perspective, not just how we feel about it.
Right.
So it's real legitimate and worthy feedback that gets to the person that needs to have that feedback. That's invaluable. And, you know, if we're going to sit by and we're going to stay in our lane, then that isn't going to happen. And so, you know, I don't know how else to do it except for we keep talking about it. We get on a podcast like this. We have our monthly events at the WMBA. You know, we produce videos, we produce emails, we communicate, and we continue to bring that message like, hey, we need to support Jessica. We need to support our industry and our livelihood because ultimately it does impact the customer.
Yeah.
And that's, I can't say it enough. It's always about that customer because that's how the lawmaker makes sense to them.
Well, and as much as it is about the customer, and I agree it is about the customer, what I think sometimes we don't realize is that when a lawmaker or legislator is making a change to a rule or policy or program or whatever that is intended to help the customer, sometimes there is unintended consequences to doing that. And one of the things about having the access and having the relationship, whether it be with DFI or with the lawmakers through Jessica, is that we get to share, you know, we get to opine on, you know, here's what you might not have considered about that. And sometimes, look, you go, well, that could have a financial negative impact on the business. And you go, well, yeah, but what about the customer? All they care about is the customer. It's like, yeah, but if there's a negative impact on the business, here's how that indirectly then still could be a negative for the customer. And they go, oh, okay, that now we can connect the dots and see. And so there is this fine line.
It's that awareness.
It's the awareness. And look, if the conversations aren't happening, then the conversations aren't happening.
That's right.
And there's been plenty of times where we've seen where the lawmakers say, hey, we're going to be voting on this. Does anyone want to share any input? And there's so few people paying attention that they just get no input.
Right.
You know, I think we've come a long way to make sure that doesn't happen. And if you look at things like the Mortgage Action Alliance, everybody on here should be part of the Mortgage Action Alliance. This is a very easy and automated way for you to communicate with the lawmakers in your state, you know, that represent your state by simply clicking a button. So Mortgage Action Alliance, download the app for sure. But that's the same kind now, and that happens at a big scale. These are the same sort of things are happening all the time on a smaller scale, and they come through relationships like the WMBA with its board members. I mean, when I send something out like that new AI proposal that came, there's a lot of legislation right now being talked about for AI and how you use AI. There's probably people right now using AI in ways that in the next few months or year could be banned and you don't even know it. Totally. And you're like, what do you mean we can't do that with AI? We can't communicate with a customer using a bot, things of this nature. Like, that's crazy. It saved us so much time. Well, if you never were able to share that information and the protections that you put in place, because that's the things that they need to hear, right? That's just one example. The list could go on and on. But when I send that stuff to like my legal team, and I've talked to Rosemary about this too. Like, they love it. They're like, thank you for giving us, we have lots to say about this. Let us give you your opinion.
We want a voice.
Yeah, and so many of you work for companies who would love you to help be the conduit of this information by being part of the WNBA or other trade organizations and then sharing this information back with your corporate office. They will give you input. They will give you their perspective. And now I have my legal team and my compliance team back in, California or whatever, able to really compile some great information, some good talking points that we can then share with Jessica that she can pass on. And you guys, this takes a network of people, and it really just takes an awareness and involvement,
Yeah, to your point, Mortgage Action Alliance is incredibly powerful. If you haven't signed up for it, please do. It's super easy. You sign up for it once, and then they send us emails or text messages or communications that say, okay, here are 3 topics or 1 topic that we need you to participate in. And basically, they have it all filled out already with all your information, including your personal address, because that's who you're going to send the, your feedback to your local lawmaker. You click a box, like you said, and you press a button, and then all of a sudden that letter, that communication goes off to the lawmaker, and they are like, okay, now I get a lot of this. I got to look into it further. So it is power in numbers and creating that awareness. And that comes from the national mortgage bankers. To two other quick examples that I think are really powerful. With the WNBA, we have an annual legislative day where we meet with all the lawmakers that Jessica schedules through her relationships. And we have a half day, we'll call it, and lunch, where we have back-to-back meetings with all our lawmakers, and there's a list of topics that we want to make sure we cover, and sometimes they come to us with topics. And AI last year, because it was still fairly new, right, but it's grown a lot, or it's evolved a lot in the last year, they were like, yeah, I don't even know anything about this, so what do you guys got to tell me? And we're like, well, here are some things that we're experiencing and what we see coming. And so that got them thinking, okay, now I got to dig deeper. There's also a legislative, it's called an Advocacy Day at the national level, where all the state mortgage bankers associations meet in DC, and we all have a full agenda, like a full booklet that the MBA puts out for all the hot topics that are coming up that may impact our industry. So then what we do is we schedule all these appointments, the MBA does, and then we go execute. We go as a small team of like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people, and we go and meet with all the lawmakers. A lot of times it's with their assistants or whoever, but we know what we're talking about, and we're prepared to speak to these hot topics. And then they walk away, and then they bring it to the lawmaker, or the lawmaker says, okay, I got to follow up with that now. And trigger leads is the big one last year, because you could tell a lot of them are like, well, no, we want, free market. Yeah, you want free market, but you don't want to, hurt the client in the process and create a bad experience. So I look forward to that. I've been to that a few times. I've been to the Legislative Day in Olympia a few times. And, it's something that's very powerful. I feel like we're actually having a difference. We're making a difference in how things are interpreted, the information that becomes available, the knowledge, and the awareness around certain topics that are hot topics of the day.
Yeah. Well, I've really enjoyed the time that I have got to do those things as well. And to me, it was fascinating to learn some of the people we met with, and they shared with us like, well, we would have a concern, and they'd be like, well, we're not too concerned about that because there's this other bill and this is going to get traded out for that. And you kind of learn a little bit about how the sausage is made, the game. Yeah. You learn about the game a little bit. And I don't know that I would ever have the perspective I have today about some of what goes on in Olympia or Washington, D.C. had I not had that small little glimpse into it. It changes your perspective a little bit.
To your point, sometimes they'll push an idea to an extreme version, knowing that it'll get shot down,
right?
But it'll clear the path for it to come down the pike the next time at a lesser, extremity.
Right.
So they tee it up, and they kind of break trail for it to come next time.
Yeah, they're like my 11-year-old negotiating with me, where it's the same thing.
It is a game.
It's a game. Well, that's a great topic. I'm glad we had a chance to dig into that. And look, I think the bottom line is, for the people watching this podcast, most of you are in the mortgage or real estate, doesn't really matter. I just implore you to get involved. Get involved, even if you just go to the events and go to a dinner or go to some other event that's being hosted by specifically the WMBA, but other trade organizations I think are important as well. And then think about contributing even a small amount to a political action committee that supports our industry. We all make our income from this industry. Believe me, you want us to have access and be the people that our lawmakers reach out to when they have questions about rules that they're going to make and things they're going to do. I guarantee you, every mortgage company out there right now is working on AI and tools around AI and ways of automating things. And I guarantee you, every one of your senior leadership teams or your compliance or your technology teams all would love to know what's happening with AI legislation. And if you're part of the WNBA, you'd be getting that. You'd be getting those emails, you'd be getting those updates, and you'd look like a hero to your company by providing them this information. And we now have the opportunity to read it, digest it, and give our own feedback, which is just invaluable.
Yeah, like you said, whether it's $20, $50, $100, it all matters. Honestly, it really does. And every little bit, if you can contribute, you can feel good about your contribution because it's going towards, our livelihood and those clients that are trying to buy homes.
Yeah.
I do want to say real quick, back to the WMBA, we are definitely in growth mode. I think a lot of these nonprofit organizations and organizations in general have been very challenged coming out of COVID in trying to make the numbers work because everything's so much more expensive due to inflation. But we hold a monthly dinner program. We have many committees that, if you have any interest, there's probably something for you. We also, put on an annual golf tournament, and we have an annual auction. And so any one of these events, anything, just come and network, come and check it out.
There's a lot of things that the organization does that cost money, right? Even employing someone like Jessica as part of the board. And so we have to generate revenue. It's a nonprofit organization. All of us are volunteers. You don't get paid to be the president unless they change something since I was president. No, I'm just kidding.
No.
We don't get paid to be board members or presidents. It's a volunteer type of a board. And the events that we do are really just, to help cover the expenses to keep us sustained, and it's like that with every, trade organization that I'm aware of, but it takes people to be, involved. And the thing is I wish loan officers and people that made a living off of our industry, felt a little bit more of an obligation to, kind of give back a little bit. I think that would be nice. Because without your support, there is no organization. And without the organization, there's no Jessica. And without Jessica, there's no line of communication. And then things happen in a vacuum, or someone else is making those decisions on our behalf. And none of us want that, because we really see the value in it. So.
I would say one of the greatest lessons I've learned in this role, particularly as president of the WMBA, is, and it sounds so simple, but helping to create that awareness is just talking about it. The more people you talk to about the WMBA and the issues that are coming up that we need to be helping influence, the more awareness it creates, the more information and knowledge gets shared. So like picking up the phone is like the most powerful tool that I've fully embraced this year. I do want to say, we have our monthly dinner, January 21st. It's being moderated by Sharon Knowles, and she has a top producing, panel of loan officers, and they're all talking about reinventing yourself and staying relevant. And, this is a super valuable panel. It's going to be a great event at the Tai Yacht Club in Seattle. And then we also have our income property lunch group. They hold quarterly events. This one is by Matthew Gardner. It's the 2025 economic
that's the
forecast.
one. If you're going to go to one event, that's the one.
If you want to know what's going on in the Puget Sound and the greater Seattle area, that's a great one. And you can join it virtually if it's already full, which I believe it is. And then February 11th, I'm actually working with Tanya at New American Funding. She's our committee chair for the programs committee, and we are putting on an industry partnership night. So we're going to have service providers, anybody that has anything to do with mortgage and real estate financing, we're going to showcase them so that people can come and learn more about our partners in our industry and what they do to help, get a loan done or help somebody buy that home. So we're doing some interesting, fun stuff. It is about community. We do have a fun networking hour, before the actual event. So I invite you all to please come. It's a great event, and you'll feel a part of a good community because this is what we all do. This is our livelihood, and we're all going through the same struggles. We're all experiencing the same challenges. We're all having the same victories and results in a similar way at different times. But, we're all in this together. At the end of the day.
I would say most of the relationships I have with senior leaders around the Seattle area, maybe I didn't meet them all at the WNBA, but I definitely deepened my relationship by being part of the WNBA. And look, I don't care what part of the country you're in. I mean, we're talking about the Washington Mortgage Bankers Association because we both live here in the Seattle market, but these organizations are all around the country, and it doesn't matter what state you're in. I encourage you to be involved at a higher level. And if this is your career and you're passionate about the mortgage industry, I promise you will get fulfillment out of being involved in your industry at a deeper level. You'll meet more people. You'll feel like you're making a difference, and it's something different to do. It's mundane just doing loans. Get involved. It's fun.
I feel honored for this opportunity. You know, it is a privilege to serve and know that we can influence things that impact our future of our industry. And I don't take that for granted. And I know nobody that serves currently. We have a whole lot of new board members. We have a lot of new committee members, and there's this renewed energy. And it's really exciting to be around because people want to contribute. They want to be a part of something special. Yeah. And I believe that we have something special going on right now.
Well, COVID, like you said, I mean, I know it was a few years ago now, right? But there's a lingering impact for organizations like this that were built around social interactions, and that's what really drove the engine of the organization. And so to have your leadership to come back and get people excited again.
It's literally 40% more expensive to put on an event at a hotel or a club or something. It's like it's becoming unattainable. Yeah. Like we can't charge $130 to go to a WMBA dinner. I don't want to pay $130. Yeah. So through a lot of intensive research and whittling down on that contract, we're able to offer a WMBA member price of $85 for our dinner right now, which I'm really proud of.
I can't even go out to dinner by myself for that. So, hey, and that dinner was super good. The last one I went to, I was like,
they're awesome.
Beef tips and all sorts of good stuff. Yeah, all right. Well, we're going to call that a wrap, you guys. Awesome. This has been a great conversation, Andy, and I appreciate you coming in. Look, I hope if nothing else, you learned a little bit about the WNBA in particular, but more than that, hopefully this inspired you to want to be involved in your local chapter of the NBA, or maybe it's AREAA, maybe it's NAREP, maybe it's any other trade industry that supports the industry. They all do a great job. But if you're in Seattle, please think about the WNBA, think about the PAC, think about having representation. We need representation more than ever on the Hill. And, that comes from the support from everyone in our industry. So, Andy, any last words?
Yeah, one more thing. So I have been participating with leadership from the DFI with all public and private and even municipality level representatives in a monthly, sometimes bi-monthly meeting. We just had one today, and it's homeownership through down payment assistance programs. So I'm very motivated through the WMBA to create more strategic partnerships. And so like NAMBA, the DFI is a great partner. The Washington State Housing Finance Commission, we do a quarterly lunch and learn with them. So I'm looking to expand those partnerships. AREAA, Peter, we were talking about doing more things together and tapping into each other's network and promoting each other's events. Yeah. Same thing with NAMBA, like I mentioned. But at the end of the day, if you do have any inspiration, you want to be inspired, the WMBA is a good place to feel good about the work that you're doing and your contributions. And if you have any questions or you want to talk about it further, reach out to myself or any other WMBA board member. Check out our website. It lists all our events, all the things that we're working on. And again, it's really meaningful and important work.
Yeah. Or just show up. Show up to one of our events.
Show up. Come join us. It'll be fun.
Right on. Well, we're going to put this on YouTube. I will definitely put the link to the website so people want to go and check out what events are coming up. And look, thank you guys for your time and attention to watch this episode. It's good to be back in the saddle. I don't know if you know this, Andy. I took December off, so this is we're getting started in the new year with a few fresh episodes. So this is one that I have a lot of passion around, and so I thank everyone for taking the time to listen. And until next time, take care. Bye for now.